Zanele, thank you for joining me today. The purpose and what we're trying to do is have a conversation around the life behind the lens. So, when we look at pictures, when we look at photographers and we interact with photographers, often there's a particular perception of the space because you don't know how people work. So the purpose of this exercise and this process for the show is, in a way, to get behind the lens. Mm-hmm. So you're a photographer and a fine artist.
I'm a photographer and a visual
activist.
Yes.
What is this something that you always wanted to do? What drew you to that space?
Not really. I grew up without a camera, so I didn't have the privilege and the luxury of owning a camera. What I wanted to do was to become a filmmaker, which brought me to Johannesburg many times ago, like many years ago. And unfortunately, I failed the interviews more than 3 times. And the school was FAO, which was Film Allied Workers Organization based in Pritchard Street. That was in the 90s. And in a way, I think it was a blessing because if I did, I'll be stuck in some corporate shooting for somebody.
Shooting commercials.
Someone, yeah. I ever wanted to say something. I ever wanted to make a statement through film, unfortunately, yeah. But I'm happy that I'm doing it through photography now. So my work is aimed at visual activism, pushing a political agenda, using visuals as means of articulation. There's so much going on in the country. There are a lot of voices that are undocumented. There are a lot of spaces in our country and beyond South African borders that need to be documented, but unfortunately people do not either have resources or particular content that is easy, to convey without being censored.
But how did you make that transition? So you struggled, or you weren't able to get into filmmaking, and like you're saying, a lot of people don't have the means to be able to get their voices out in whatever form. How did you go from I didn't make it into the school, to picking up a camera, to going out and taking pictures and getting that clear thought? A lot of times in life, everything, when we look back, from my perspective, it looked very clean. Mm-hmm. Like you were here and then now you are here. Mm-hmm. But what I want to understand is, from that point, what happened next? And how do you then get from there to where you are sitting today?
Yeah, for me, Kojo, I just I had to work. I've been working, meaning I had to buy my own camera. I remember the second-hand camera, I bought it in some pawn shop in Hillbrow for $600. And then I juggled between my NGO work and went to school in between. Like, I stole time from work and I had to go to school because there was no much enough time to go maybe after hours, So I had to do 3 things. I studied public relations at UNISA, which was through correspondence, and it really helped me to be able to communicate with the people that I was working with and also dealing with different kind of things. And I work full-time as a staff, like community outreach officer for Behind the Mask, and also reported on different issues. I think it's there then I realized that there was so much content that did not make it to the mainstream media. So I worked, I earned, I bought my own equipment. And at the time we were using film cameras, and I had to go to the darkroom, process my own work and make a decision what image had to be in and what had to be out. Because film is not easy, when you use analog. It's not as easy as how digital is today, where you decide of 100 images, what's the best, and after that you still have to Photoshop. So I worked for my own content in a way that nobody had to say something against what I was trying to achieve. So it's my money, it's my work, it's my voice, it's my space, it's the community that I belong to, which is mainly Black LGBTI individuals, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and some trans people at that time. So I managed to to set a precedent. That
Where were you sharing your images? I mean, were you already setting up exhibitions in your own spaces, or where were you sharing those images once you've taken them and developed them?
I submitted abstract at different conferences, which were mainly academic conferences. And in that way, I could present work that was theorized by the expert or by some professors. So I guess that's how I managed to penetrate the scenes where maybe not many people were ready, to consume such materials. I remember one of my best first conference was being one of the panelists at UWC, University of Western Cape, and they had a good conference in 2004 that was called Gender and Visuality. I think that particular space opened my mind in a different way, because most of the viewers, they thought that the images that I presented, which were only 4, they thought were presented by a white man. And some people, they wrote some scriptures and that you're not supposed to be projecting such images of black bodies, because I started with the body before the portrait. So I took images of the body, and I wanted to say sexuality of a human being is skin deep, not the clothes that you wear, not how you speak, not how you present yourself in public. So I wanted to go deep into the core. And that time, I think like one of the images, like my 4 signature images, were looking like deeply, and people weren't ready. Like having an image of a woman wearing a dildo, speaking of like how HIV programming didn't include lesbians in their programs, and people only assume that the people who could contract, the HIV is gay men.
Gay men, yeah.
And then they didn't think of like the number of hate crime which black lesbians, encountered in different spaces, which led to many being HIV positive. So I needed to speak on that particular issue. And then I wrote a paper called Thinking Through Lesbian Rape, which was published by Agenda Journal. I never limited myself into like photographic spaces as such, because speaking as an activist, there were very, very few spaces in which you could say, this is the issue, and you want to speak, but then there are limited spaces where activists showcase their work. Maybe these days there are a number of spaces where activists could showcase their work, but like early 2000, before 2004, we didn't have many spaces where you have number of exhibitions as much as we like today.
Now, yes.
Yeah. So mine was like, okay, this content is meant to be for education or educational purposes. We have the best constitution in the world that nobody has what we have. We are the country that has served within the continent and beyond. We have the constitution, we have same-sex marriages throughout the whole country. We have a large population size. We are a welcoming nation. Now, bring forth all of these visuals and make sure that that content is available at our libraries. Make sure that the content is accessible to those people who just decide upon themselves that LGBTI people are not part of the society. Where you have to deal with homophobic statement from our leaders, where they say being homosexual is an African. I just come from Durban. My researcher and friend Lerato just shared an article. In Durban, they have a political party that is against same-sex marriages in this country, in this democratic country. And you think that this is backlash, and it just takes us back to where we were. It's like somebody have an organization that promotes racism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mkhaya, this is Life with Kojo Baffoe. I'm busy chatting to Zanele Mohuli, a photographer, a visual artist, and a visual activist in particular. And I think activism is a very strong part of who you are and what you do. And the work, it feels like the work reflects that, as opposed to you're a photographer and the activism is an add-on to that. How do you feel your photography has impacted on perceptions, particularly of kind of black LGBTI individuals and communities, both in the country as well as across the continent?
Impacts meaning
in terms of influencing perception.
Yep.
For example, you're talking about an image of you started off with black bodies and the focus being on black bodies.
Sure. the impact that my work, and I'll say my work, our work, because it's not about me all the time, it's about the community. And there are so many people who are featuring in the work that I have produced, people who have trusted me enough to be in it, and some few resistance there and then to those maybe who might become straight tomorrow, which is okay. The impact, just like thinking of education. Education is key. Education is very important. And you're thinking of like queers and geographies, you're thinking of like LGBTI people and South African history, how all of this commotion is embedded into what, when you speak of like the nation, not only the rainbow nation that you see only when it's time for pride, but to have a content that speaks to educators and help the child in that, within that setting, to know that she or he is not alone. You know, speaking at the high age of transgenderism, where people are becoming and discovering a different kind of gender, where a lot of education is needed. Speaking at a period where a lot of mothers have lost their children and they think that maybe they're the only ones, and there's so much suffering that people are experiencing in different spaces. So the impact is like on education, educators, and also longing desperately to have work that could make life easier for those who do not understand. Because not only I look at pride, I'm so beyond pride. We're looking at religion and homosexuality and transgenderism. We're documenting churches that are LGBTI friendly, that are led or steered by members of our community who are saying God is love and therefore you are made in the image of love. We've been documenting a church in Durban that is led by one of our lesbian men, and also trans people are church leaders within that space. So it goes beyond just like the limited spaces that are granted to us whenever the state decides that you could raise your hand now because we're giving you some rights, you know. And you're thinking of like most of the universities abroad, they use my work. And some of the students here in South Africa, they write a dissertation and thesis using the content that I've produced prior to help them further share the knowledge with many people in different spaces.
And portraiture, you've started, you know, I think it's considered one of your specialties to a certain extent. What prompted that, not necessarily shift, but the expansion to, you know, the human face and portraiture?
What is just think of Darwin's study. It's crazy. What is important with portraiture? I just want people to see themselves. Okay. I want to see myself in you, and you see yourself in other people who are participants in my work, and not only to look at like LGBTI people as if they not part of your planet, because we're so much here, and it will take time for people to erase us. Which is why I want to make sure that we make a mark and we make a statement. Yeah. So portrait has become one of my key elements, because maybe many other things, when you look at the image, they become a distraction. But when you like want to focus on somebody and you don't want to forget, like I'm looking at you right now, there are key things that I won't forget if I leave this space, because they always mark that particular detail in your face. You know, it could either be your hair in your face and your glasses and so on. I cannot forget you. So that's how I look at like human beings, you know, how distinct and how prominent and how features play a key role, that you only forget that person if you like. The marks in our faces, the spot, especially if there are no preservatives, but like remembering that particular person. So I think for me, portraits means to remember. And there's just no other way that you could dare to forget what you have seen today. And then the picture then becomes the thing that helps us to memorize, you know, especially if we have the visual sense, you know, respecting that there are people who are visually impaired. Yeah.
This is Life with Kojo Baffoe, and today we are getting behind the lens and interacting with photographers. And right now I'm busy chatting to Zanele Mohuli, who's a photographer and visual activist. What's your process when preparing to shoot? I mean, do you just walk in with a camera,
oh, no,
put on lights
not.
and...
You know? No, definitely. My process is easier but difficult in a way. I work with people that I love, and I work with people that I really like, who have become members of my family. And you have Tara here, who is one of the participants in my Faces and Faces series and many other projects, and whose photographs is published, in some different publications. Then I work with Lerato. Tera is a filmmaker and photographer, and Lerato is a journalist / writer editor. I'm working within a very, very nice and comfortable space, and I've managed to create a family, my extended family, that makes sense to me, in which we support each other emotionally and beyond just the photo. And it happened that our sexuality becomes the common a thing that keeps us together, in a warm space. The process is simpler. We make arrangements prior, we have conversations, and then we shoot. And it happened that most of us have our own cameras, and then we communicate in different ways. So it's comforting and healing to think that there are those people who are willing to be seen, trusting what you have to do. But communication becomes the major role in all of this. We just can't walk into a space with strangers and start shooting. And it's always better if that is negotiated in advance. I don't do much assignments like shooting anybody just for the sake of making money. There are people in my life that I want to be comfortable with them. Okay. Unfortunately, some people don't live longer, and I don't know how long will I live to be able to shoot the person that I've been saving for many years before I photograph. So there are people that I've known for years, maybe 5 or more, that I never photographed, that I only feel now that I need to photograph them. So I could say between friends and friends of friends or acquaintances, but we need to feel the beat and be comfortable with each other. Yeah, I just won't work if I don't feel you. I won't photograph anybody if I don't feel like. I won't shoot for the sake of just having an image. I need to have something that comes from within that says, do it now.
Is there a image that you have taken recently that you could say is your favorite? One of your last images that you can go, this is, right now I took that picture and I look at it and I'm feeling myself like that. Do any come to mind? And what is it? What is it? I want to also understand what it is about that image.
I love photography. I have a hashtag say I love photography, and the other one said not without my head. I guess it says something. Not without this head. There is an image that I just recently shot in North Carolina. We just came from a month-long residency in North Carolina in a place called Durham. With Lerato, Tera, and Linde. I always encourage us to take self-portraits. So there's a series that I'm working on, which will be published sooner to come out next year. It's called Somnyama Ngonyama. So there is one particular image that I captured last month, and it's a self-portrait. And I use material in my own body, and it's quite dark because I'm dealing with, I'm trying to protest against any forms of racism that is happening in our spaces and beyond our spaces. And we come from, when we go to the US, they just shot a black man. His name is Keith Scott. He was killed just a few days after we landed in the States. So I guess I just wanted to dedicate that particular document to someone that once lived. And also remembering that we are the same, even though we're not from the same continent, but the pain that the Americans are feeling at this time of racial attacks, which most South Africans have experienced at the hands of the past regime. So I produced that image remembering that man that I never met, but whose parents are mourning the death of this guy who was shot dead, and he succumbed to something unnecessarily. And a father that left his children, who'll always be remembered as the victim of racial hate crime in the state. So that image is a self-portrait, but dedicated to someone that I never met because of understanding the pain and loss, of that person.
What does the future hold for you? I mean, you've got this coming out, but where do you see yourself and your work next year and 5 years from now?
I wish I could live longer, which is important, and we can't run away from that because of disease and many things that are happening. I wish I could reach that 5 years, that to be honest. From now on, we're talking at publications. They say you publish or perish. So I'm working to ensure that my work is published. Because if I rely on exhibitions that do not last longer, it will mean that I'm shortchanging me and many individuals who are featuring in my work. I want my work to penetrate educational spaces around the country or in Africa, because there's some resistance in different parts of Africa where homosexuality and transgenderism is still outlawed. So I want this work not only to be for LGBTI people, but to be for all those who care and those that still see homosexuality and transgenderism as a sin, to rethink of how all of us were born by human beings who might not necessarily be like us, but who had feelings and they engage sexually and intimately and they produce us, you know. And this work is for my brothers and sisters who are preaching now and praying for the end of this thing, as they call it, to say, listen, guys, it's okay. Do your damn thing. I produce my images, but let's meet somewhere and have a common understanding, because I won't preach for somebody who's straight to be queer. Therefore, I don't need your prayer, because I could pray for myself. So I just want my work to be used by educators in different departments or fields, from scientists and medicine. There are doctors who are discovering some things that will help the transgender child or intersex child. And if those people are homophobic or transphobic, it means that the child's life will be in danger. There are teachers who are promoting bullying of homosexuals or homosexual child or children at schools. Those teachers need to understand that they need some reference point to further educate and do not push a hate agenda. And I want to make sure that if we preach love, let's have homosexuals and trans people or LGBTI people in the house of God engaging with their fellow pastors and priests. Let's push it nicely. No hate, but love. And if you don't understand, ask questions. And if we have to change the Bible and the content thereafter, let's do it together.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
5 years from now, publications, changing the educational setting and content to accommodate everybody.